All right, guys, week 6. This is going to be very similar to what we've done before, and you're going to see that in the quick review. Just changing up what the power is going to be, so it'll change out what the root's going to be when you're solving. So when we go to this quick review up here, right, our first little quick review, just solve the following for x. We have 3x squared equals 12. This is very easy, right? Hopefully you guys remember this from quadratics. All we're going to do here is divide by 3, both sides, right? That'll get rid of the 3 there, and then that'll give us x squared equaling 4. Then we got to take the square root of both sides. That will cancel out the squared here, so I'll have x. This is where things got a little bit tricky for a lot of my students. They understood what it meant, but you're so used to doing this so fast to saying x would equal 2 here, which isn't completely wrong, right? But now we're a little bit smarter than what we used to be, and we know that this is plus or minus, right? It's plus or minus 2, because positive 2 times positive 2 is 4, right? But so is negative 2 times negative 2, right? So taking the square root of something gives us 2 answers, the positive and the negative version of that answer, right? That's always going to happen when we have even exponents, right? So 2 is an even exponent, so let's write that here. You get a positive and negative answer. You get both when dealing with even exponents. That looks really bad. Why is that? Well, because anytime you have even exponents, those negatives could cancel each other out, right? When I have x to the x squared, right, that even exponent tells me that I can have 2 negatives, and those negatives will cancel out, right? If I have x to the 4th, when I take the 4th root of something, the same thing. I can have all 4 of them be negative, and they would all cancel out to be positive, right? So I have to put a plus or minus in front of my answer whenever I have an even exponent. Coming over here, same difference, right? Same difference. I've got to do this just a little bit different order now. Now I've got that squared on the outside of the parentheses, so I've got to get rid of that first. So I've got to take the square root of both sides, right? And again, this is quadratics, guys. This is review. Should be review for all of us. So to get rid of that squared, I've got to take the square root. So here I will get x plus 8 equals, and again, I have to put plus or minus the 6 here. Right, but then we're not done. We've still got to subtract this 8 from both sides. So these will cancel. I'm going to put this negative 8 out front here so that I can put that plus or minus as an expression in the middle. So I've got x equals negative 8 plus or minus 6. Now I've got to actually physically do those two operations, right? So this is where it kind of splits off. So I'm going to bring this up here, and I have both operations. I have a possible answer having x plus 6, and I have a possible answer saying x minus 6. So let's go ahead and solve those. Negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. And negative 8 minus 6 is negative 14. So those are my 2 answers. If you don't believe me, you can plug those in for x here and check them out. Right? Should give you the correct answers. Okay, so there is opportunities where we're going to get 2 answers, and then you may ask yourself, well, okay, we get plus or minus, we get 2 answers whenever there's even exponents. What about when there's odd exponents? That you'll just get one definite answer, right? Because negatives won't cancel out whenever you have an odd number of exponents. They will keep the negative or they'll keep the positive. So when you have an odd exponent, like our number 1 down here, you're just going to have one concrete answer. You're not going to have multiple, right? So hopefully you remember that stuff from way back when, right? Just solving. And when you finally get down to x and the exponent, you just take the root of it. The only difference now, guys, is going to be we're not squaring things, we're cubing things, or we're taking it to the 4th root of things or the 5th root of things. So, I'm sorry, not the 5th root. We're to the 5th exponent or the 4th exponent. So in order to solve, you're going to have to use the cube root, the 4th root, or the 5th root. But otherwise, it's the same exact process, guys. Same exact process. So let's go down to number 1. Here, again, like I said, it's the same process. So this looks a lot like this first review problem, right? And the process is going to be the exact same. So what I'm going to do here is divide by 5, get rid of that 5, divide by 5. So I'm going to get x to the third equals 216, because I can do math in my head. And then instead of taking the square root like we did up here, instead of taking the square root, now we're going to take the cube root because we've got to get rid of a cubed, right? Simple as that. So now I'm going to take the cube root of both sides. So the cube root and that cube will cancel out, so I'll just get an x. And the cube root of 216, definitely use a calculator on these guys, but the cube root of 216 is going to be 6. And again, this is an odd exponent, so I'm just going to get one concrete answer. I'm not going to get a plus and minus here, just one concrete answer. Right? So yeah, if you look at these guys, it's the same exact process. Look at the work here, and then look at the work here. It's the same thing. It's just we're using a different root because we have a different exponent. Nothing changes here. Nothing changes here, right? So then let's go down to number 2. Notice how number 2 looks a lot like this second review up here, so the work should look very similar. Let's see if it does. Right, so number 2. I'm going to come down here and use red. So I have x minus 5 to the 4th power equals 256. Right, so again, just like that second review problem, we've got to get rid of that to the 4th power first, because that's what's outside those parentheses. I got to get rid of those parentheses, right? So first things first, I'm going to rewrite this so it's a little bit easier to write. That's 4th root. So my first step here is to take the 4th root of both sides. Right, that will cancel out this root and this exponent. So all I've got left over here is x minus 5. And the 4th root of 256 is going to be 4. But, uh-oh, I almost forgot. But it's not just 4 because this is an even exponent. It's an even exponent, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all those are even. So whenever I have an even exponent, I've got to put plus or minus. Plus or minus. Right? Then I've got to add this 5 to both sides. Add this 5 to both sides. These will cancel. I'm going to put this guy right up front here because I want that plus or minus to be an operation in the middle. So what I'm left with here is x equals 5 plus or minus 4. And that's exactly what it means. Plus or minus. You may look at this, guys, and start to say, like, what does that mean? There's 2 operations. Which one do I do? It's exactly how you read it. 5 plus or minus 4, right? So you literally do both of those expressions. You do 5 plus 4, you do 5 minus 4. So that's what we're going to do up here. So I have 5 plus 4 as my first option. 5 minus 4 is my second option. 5 plus 4 is 9. 5 minus 4 is 1. So those are my answers. Those are my answers. And again, go ahead and plug those back into x if you don't believe me, right? There are 2 possibilities here, and you can plug those back in and see for yourself. Just make sure you use parentheses whenever you do it, right? So yeah, not too bad, right? And again, that work looks exactly like the work of our review problem. Same thing, right? Square root. Add or subtract to get rid of, place it in front, do both operations, right? Same thing down here. Take the root, plus or minus to get rid of, have you both have operations here, so you play out those operations, see what your answer is. It's the same thing, right? Nothing too new here, guys, really nothing too new. Coming down to number 3, same thing, right? Nothing crazy. We just got to solve for that x. So first things first, we got to subtract 52 from both sides. Subtract 52. That gets rid of this. And so then we have x cubed equals, it looks like it's going to be negative 27. And then I'm going to actually change up color so it's a little bit easier to see. We're going to take the cube root of both sides. So what am I going to be left with? I'm just going to be left with x equals, and the cube root of negative 27 is negative 3. Again, it's an odd exponent here, so I only have one concrete answer. Right? I'm not going to have a plus or minus here. Okay. And then finally, number 4, right? Last one. Again, none of this is really that new, guys. That's why I'm kind of breezing through this. It really is kind of just review, and then we're just using different exponents in these cases. And you should be using your calculators. So none of this crazy root stuff, the cube root, 4th root, 5th root, none of that should really scare you. Calculator do all the crazy work for you, right? You just got to be able to solve it. So first things first here, I'm going to rewrite this problem. So what I find a lot of my kids wanting to do whenever they're doing this, they're going to divide by a 1/6 here, which is just fine. If you're using a calculator, it'll give you the correct answer, right? But a quicker way to do this, when you see a fraction, and especially if it's 1 over that fraction, if a 1 is in the numerator of that fraction, then you want to just come out here and say, let's just multiply by the denominator. So let's multiply both sides by 6 over 1, right? Which is basically just 6. What that's going to do here is these will cancel out completely. They will just become a 1, and that 1 is a coefficient is going to cancel out, right? So that will cancel out there, and then this other side will equal 216. So let's write that out. Negative 216, sorry. So this x to the third will be by itself. Negative 36 times 6 is going to be negative 216. And then I just solve, right? So then come out here and get a cube root. That will cancel out this and this. So I'll just be left with x. And the cube root of negative 216, if you guys remember from way up here, it was positive up here, right? Cube root of 216 was 6. So that makes it really easy on me. It's the same thing, except it's going to be negative, right? So x equals negative 6. Okay, so I hope that you guys catch on to this pretty quickly. I think you should, especially if you were good with quadratics and solving quadratics. It's really the same exact process. Just kind of rely on your calculator to do those crazy roots for you. Obviously, not a lot of you have this kind of thing memorized. That's no problem, right? That's why we have calculators. So as long as you get the solving portion of it, you're going to be just fine. Okay? Hope you're staying safe, and have a good one.